The Pætheon presents What Came Out, The Origins of the Fastbrækers, written and read by the author, Andrew Stewart Bergerson, based on real events.
Bastian and the Great Hawthorne. Aristus Totalis was a Dasosi wizard of the Fourth Age. According to legend, she was the first person to combine 4 schools of magic into one spell: evocations, abjurations, enchantments, and illusions. She called the spell mythos. The words of a mythos are not reality, but that does not make them any less real. I'm reminded of the famous Andras artist, Sambra, who painted a perfectly accurate painting of a pipe. Then he wrote words above it. Ce n'est pas une pipe. This is not a pipe. Sambra was reminding us of the treachery of images. Aristus Totalis understood the treachery of words. A mythos is not the same as a myth. Myths are all about us together. They evoke a cosmos. Mythos centers on specific people. It summons into existence the kind of world where that person can be the kind of person they most want to be. It creates almost limitless opportunities for reinventing the self. Before he joined the Fastbrækers, Bastian had mastered the craft of the jongleur. He juggled words like any of his props, and always for effect. His tales were not made up out of thin air. Bastian just felt no particular allegiance to the truth. Flame dancing is pure mythos. It draws your attention to the dancer at the center of the flames. The story is always about the storyteller. This one is called Bastian and the Great Hawthorne. We left the young elder in a meadow in late flower season playing games. Bastian was about to fire off another black-eyed Susan, who only had its black eye left, when he stopped short. The head of a pixie was hovering right in his line of sight. The sprite was no more than several inches tall. He was dressed for war with armor, a helmet, and a shield made of bark. He had a rapier the size of a sewing needle at his side, and a bow and quiver of arrows on his back, stored securely between his dragonfly wings. His almond shell helmet was painted to look like the head of a hawk. "Where have you been?" the pixie demanded. Bastian lowered his weapons. "Hey there, honey bunny. Why the long face?" It was an old pun, but Bastian never got tired of using it. The sprite's real name was Honeysuckle Hawkrider, because the fruit of the haskap was his totem. The bell-shaped blueberry elongated his face and made it look like it was in resting sad mode. That was unfortunate. The sweetness of the fruit actually made the captain of the fairy force into a really nice guy. Hawkrider did not rise to the bait. In many awkward situations, particularly when Bastian was caught in the act, he adopted a lilting way of speaking, with lots of slang that sounded like a little song, but it was meant ironically. "What you doing on Whozle Hill?" "Whozle Hill!" Hawkrider flitted left and right, as if seeing the ground below him with new eyes. "No wonder I couldn't find you." Hawkrider was vexed. Bastian tried to act casual. "So, where you been?" "Trying to find you. I looked everywhere. What do you have to say for yourself?" The captain knew how to dress down a new recruit. "Well," Bastian tried to dance around the question, "if you couldn't find me, then you probably should have checked on Whozle Hill. It's kind of the place for not found things." No doubt you've heard the tales. Whozles are so good at hiding and seeking that few animals in the vast wood ever bothered trying to find them. This strange situation led to many outrageous claims as to their true appearance. "You've been gone for days. Were you trying to be not found?" "Then Whozle Hill would have been the right spot for me." Bastian wanted Hawkrider to praise him, but not enough to change his ways. "Riddle me this, Captain. Why do Whozles announce where they live when they don't want to be found? It's not a good strategy." Hawkrider stared at the miscreant elder. His wings hummed furiously with frustration. So Bastian added, "What do you think?" Mythos employed stock characters. easily recognizable from a distance and perfect for a circus audience. The spell did not pass judgment on the characters for doing good or evil acts, for adhering to norms or breaking with conventions. A 5-minute act did not allow for much character development. The drama came from how the characters reacted to each other and the world around them, usually in predictable ways. I was not so forgiving. Bastian's personal mythos seemed self-destructive to me. In my detective work, I saw many adolescents invent fake personas, a kind of defense mechanism against a hostile world, as if they were indifferent to their society, in control of their own destiny. Ironically, this survival strategy prevented them from accepting their circumstances. That's where I thought I fit in. I met a lot of young offenders like Bastian. I tried to help them adjust to social expectations so they could leave Shermer jail on the right foot. When I first met Bastian, I was convinced that the real world had no place for mythos. Civilization, I believed, could not accommodate the wild fantasies of every unruly child. Growing up meant sacrificing our childish dreams on the altar of adult realities. At some point, we must all face the consequences of our actions. But I had worked with enough young people to know he would not listen. I mean, who knows? Bastian continued, impregnating the silence. Some Whozles may be watching us right now, and we'd never know it. The thought of an audience for his battle with Shiwang so thrilled the young elder that he spoke louder, using his stage voice. He pirouetted a little too, pointing his arms here and there, since he wanted all the hiding Whozles to enjoy good views of his performance. Tell us, mysterious Whozle kind, why do you give away freely the very thing you cherish the most, your privacy? Whozlekind did not reply. All he saw was a thrush, looking rather exacerbated with him. Did you take care of your job? Hawkrider tried to catch the young elder's attention. Of course, honey bear. And what did you find? You know. You actually found some? How close? Where? Hawkrider thought he was being serious. Over there. Bastian pointed off into the wood. Hawkrider flitted towards the forest floor, then stopped. You didn't find anything. Bastian scratched his back and looked awkward. Hawkrider zipped back sharply. You don't even remember what I asked you to do. It's been a few days, like you said. When the elder acted like a child, Hawkrider treated him as such. You know, Bastian, you really can be infuriating. I gave you one simple task. We were depending on you. You really let me down. You let down the queen. Bastian mumbled. You sound like the old man. You mean your father, the hero who saved your life? The villain who abducted me? Adopted. You like it fine here in the Pætheon. But it was such a chore. Bastian kicked a lump of grass. Yes, work is boring. That's why it's called work. It's my job to protect our home. Hawkrider was referring to the great Hawthorne. And it was your job to hunt for scat. That's a real crappy job. You told me you wanted to serve the queen, protect our family. What did you think the fairy force meant? Flying around all day playing tricks on each other? But it was really gross. Of course it's gross. Everything about ogres is gross, especially what comes out of them. Bastian made an exaggerated grimace. So you did find some after all? No, not new anyway. Just what Bayberry showed me. Bayberry had spotted some ogre scat a dozen or so leagues from the great Hawthorne. For the 14th time, we have to know what Jeer is hunting. He eats anything he can catch. Bastian was suddenly an expert on ogre diets. The only way to know what goes into an ogre is to look at what comes out. A fairy wouldn't even make a good appetizer. Bastian waved his hand. There's not enough space in the wood anymore. Hawkrider was getting exasperated. What with the Great Trunk Road? We have to be vigilant about defending our territory. The recruit dismissed his captain. You worry too much, honey. Jeer was probably just passing from fen to fen. There were both upper and lower fens in the vast wood. Bastian could not imagine why anyone would choose either for their home. If he or any of his Uggy buddies show up again, we can poke him a few times in his bottom, like we did with those settlers. Do you see him bothering us anymore? This is not a game, Bastian. One ogre alone could pull down the Hawthorne. You want that to happen to the queen? Bastian's father used to make the same kind of dire warnings of chaos monsters threatening so-called civilization. Bastian wanted nothing to do with the Ring Empire, and that included worrying about it. Or about anything, really. Worrying only interfered with him dreaming up epic tales to put into his juggling acts. You got to hear the trick I played on old Shiwang. Hawkrider flew up close, so he was right in front of Bastian's face. His wings beat so furiously that they dripped tiny sparkles of fairy dust. No, stop! I don't want to hear another endless Bastian yarn. You make it all up anyway. Bastian acted insulted. Not all of it. Bastian was about to launch into another defense of his misbehavior when a wind rushed through the trees on both sides of the hill. Whoosh! In an instant, Bastian and Hawkrider held their swords in their hands, looking around for danger. Another wind came. This time, the message was clearer. Captain! Hawkrider shot over to the grove of aspen on the far side of the hill, where he could hear better. Bastian ran after him. Come home, Captain Hawkrider. The wind whispered through the leaves. It was the voice of Queen Melisande. Crusaders are coming. The aspen murmured their agreement and their concern. Hurry, Hawkrider!
We've got to get back, Hawkrider instructed Bastian.
It's just a bunch of dorks. Bastian liked to use the pejorative for crusaders. The queen's got all sorts of enchantments protecting the fairy home from the likes of them. Go! Make haste! Protect your nest! It was Shiwang. The giant cobra stuck her head back out of her hole. Perhaps you'll even find a nice crack to hide in. What do you care about fairy, you rat snake? Bastian replied. I need my hunting practice. That's whack. Go back to your crack and croak. Now, Bastian, Hawkrider commanded. Shiwang hissed at Bastian. Bastian hissed back, but the cobra was right. Bastian did not want anything to happen to his fairy friends, so he started to run. As an elder, Bastian could sprint through the forest quicker than a fish in water. But if you've ever seen a hummingbird, you'd know that Hawkrider could fly even faster. You're leaving me behind, Bastian kept shouting. The captain kept circling back. We won't make it at this rate. You have to keep up. I'm trying. Bastian leaned into the run at full tilt, his chest heaving from the exertion. Anyway, he panted, we're not that far away. We need more speed. The captain assumed a position right ahead of Bastian and began to flutter his wings quickly to release more stardust. Mana is everywhere, but the extra measure of it in their wings is another reason why fairy are such amazing pilots. The particles of stardust floated gently onto Bastian's head like tiny sparkles. He felt lighter. He took bigger and bigger strides, jumping from blade to rock to branch to limb until Bastian was vaulting from the top of one tree to the next in Hawkrider's slipstream. It was not flying precisely, more like vertically supported leaping. Now that's what I'm talking about, like the high wire. Focus, Bastian. This could be your first fight. Hawkrider grabbed Bastian by the collar and pulled the elder along as fast as he could. I've been in like hundreds of battles. Stage combat doesn't count. Just hope I leave some dorks for you. They passed like a harvest breeze across the uppermost branches, covering leagues in mere moments. Still, It felt like an eternity before Bastian spotted the area of the forest covered in morning mist. The fairy glade. Hawkrider descended into the foliage. "Wait for my orders. We've no idea what we're facing." They entered the enchanted cloud. Without the freedom of mana to counteract the law of gravity, Bastian skipped down from one branch to the next, like descending a staircase. He landed softly and silently on the forest floor. The foliage was naturally thick in this part of the wood. Ranks of lindens stood sentinel around the fairy glen, their delicate flowers filling the forest with heavy perfume. It was months before their usual season. Still, flowers fell on Bastian's head in greeting. The mist weaving its tendrils through their ancient boughs was otherworldly, an extension of the twilight of the living tree into the mortal fields below. They stood in semi-darkness. The great Hawthorne shielded itself with a barrier of shadow that resisted intrusion. The queen added further enchantments to confound unwelcome visitors. Bastian and Hawkrider were both fey folk, so fairy charms only made them giggle. Their eyes adjusted readily to the dim light under the thick foliage. Dense brambles of thorn bushes formed the outermost barrier to the glade, followed by the queen's linden guard. In only one place around the entire circumference was there space enough for a human-sized creature to pass through. From the damaged branches, they could tell that crusaders had entered this way. Bastian found traces of blood in the foliage. They positioned themselves on the sides of the exit. Between the trunks, faint rays of pale green light filtered through the misty dark. The rays flickered as if figures, small and large, were flashing in front of the source of light in the spirit world. And they listened. 1,000 wings were fluttering in tight circles. Above the steady din, they heard orders being shouted, tiny explosions echoing out, and loud cries of pain from man-sized creatures. Hawkrider rested on a branch of the linden at the right of the entrance. Bastian slid through the brambles to stand on the left, but when he leaned up against the trunk, he pulled back suddenly in pain. The tree is in agony. Its bark had been badly scarred. A magical brand was burning its way into the heart of the wood. Abjuring flame was one of the first tricks that Bastian learned as a flamedancer. Try as he might, he could not draw the fire out of the wound. He recognized the symbol, a burnt and half-broken tower, the infamous Tortus Cremata of the Holy Inquest. This tree's been cursed. "Spitfires! Protect their flanks!" Bastian could hear Damselwing issuing commands. He was always in the middle of things. His pilots were armed with tiny bows made from the hearts of yew branches and arrows made from the thorns of the honey locust tree. "The children! Get the children away!" That was Freddy Bulrush, the strongest fairy in the glade. He taught floral arranging to the fledglings, a required course of study for fairy children. "I'll chase away those dorks," Bastian said to himself. "Then Hawk'll love me again." "Redtails, attack!" That was Spear Thistle. She was the best pilot in the force. "No one can fly like the Redtails. I feel sorry for those crusaders." "Artillery, now!" Jimmy Dugmoss loved to light a fire under his enemies, or his friends for that matter. Those dorks won't stand a chance against his exploding acorns. "To the Queen! The Queen!" That was Bayberry, the best warrior in the Royal Guard. Between the fairy voices, Bastian identified the voices of the Crusaders. "Get them away! They're crawling all over me!" a man cried out. "Ba ding!" a woman shouted. "Bind!" "Damn these brownie!" another man cursed. Most people have an intuitive sense about fairy kind. Fun and games, playing tricks. They consider us terrible bores. But when fairy folk are threatened, they can be as painful as a swarm of yellow jackets. "Watch out, Sergeant!" a fourth man warned. "Hold your ground!" a fifth man ordered. Bastian pointedly displayed all 5 fingers. Hawkrider held up his own hand for Bastian to stay put. Bastian's foot started to tap with impatience. "Come on, Hawk!" He motioned to Hawkrider to allow him to join the battle. Hawkrider shook his head. "He doesn't think I do anything right." "Damn these emo!" the woman cried again. It was the TA word for evil devils. "Chengzi!" one of the men called out. "Punish!" "Watch out!" the sergeant warned. Bastian could now make out the cries of Fairy, fear, anger, pain. The young elder waved his hand impatiently at Hawkrider to let him enter the fray. But the Fairy captain pointed at him with one finger, instructing him to wait. "Shanja Shu!" the captain shouted. "The tree! Cut down the Hawthorne!" "We have no axes," the woman replied. "Then use your swords," a man countered. "There are too many of these little monsters." "Slay them all." "We must fall back, Sergeant. There's not enough of us." "No retreat. We finally found this accursed thing." "We can end this story right here, right now." Then he cried out in pain, "Darnation!" Bastian hoped it had been Bayberry who gave the dork such a good poke. "All together now! Swarm!" "Good old Damselwing!" Bastian cheered from the sidelines. Bastian hated the sidelines. "Charge!" "Go, Spear Thistle!" How he wished he could have seen the Redtails attack. They flew in perfect formation, their namesake red feathers like a streak of flame in the sky. The sounds of battle got louder and closer. Then Bastian heard a series of dull thuds, like a bat hitting a row of wet rag dolls. Grunts and wings and cries filled the air. Bastian figured out Hawkrider's tactic. This trail, it's the only way for a man-sized creature to get out of the glade, and it leads directly past us. He wants me to attack them on the way out. He readied his blades. "Will do, Captain." Now that it came to it, Bastian felt strange about raising his swords for actual combat. It was one thing to tease a giant cobra, it was another to attack a squad of crusaders. Bastian also felt a certain sense of obligation to his craft. It felt a little crass to draw blood, like he was about to fail in the first lesson of juggling with swords. "But I don't have to cut them to outsmart them." "This is Lingchi," a voice complained. Death by 1,000 cuts, an infamous torture in the lands of Ward. "They won't abandon their precious tree. We can come back with more men." "More women." "More axes." "Retreat! Chutwe! Retreat!" Hawkrider raised his hand in anticipation. The woman came through first. Her flat black hair was bound by a white headband in the style of Sakura Nights. Bastian let her run through the lindens and past the brambles. As he heard the heavy steps of the second crusader, Hawkrider gave the order with a wave of his hand. Bastian stuck his foot out from the thorn bush. The dork flew headlong to the forest floor. Hawkrider stuck him full of needles with his bow. Bastian could tell that this man was from Sire. His frame was broader and taller than the Tieren, and his hair brown and curly. The third dork stumbled over the second in his haste. This Tieren was younger, thinner, his straight black hair cut short. Hawkrider stuck him with 3 needles in quick succession. The crusader cried out in pain. The needles were small but sharp. His skin was covered in lesions. The dorks were panicking now. None of them turned back to discover why they tripped or who shot them. They needed to get away from the barrage of needles. As they both tried to get up at the same time, the 2 dorks fell over each other. An instant before the fourth arrived, Bastian leapt out in front of him. He was larger and stronger than the acrobatic elder. Bastian could see that this officer was not fully human. He had leathery red skin and goat-like horns that extended from his forehead. "How about picking on someone your own size, dork?" It was a stock line. They locked eyes and swords. As the Crusader began to bear down with his full weight against Bastian's right-hand sword, Bastian glared back and resisted, letting the Crusader feel like he was winning. As soon as the Diabolus began to relish in the Elder's imminent defeat, Bastian punched him in the jaw with his left. The jongleur was equally dexterous with both hands. The sergeant was the last to leave the glade, and saw Bastian strike the Diabolus with his fist, but he chopped his way through the brambles with his sword instead. While the angry Diabolus pummeled Bastian with his sword again and again, the sergeant encircled him and attacked from behind. Bastian was caught between the two Crusaders. So Bastian submitted. The young elder used the momentum from the attack from the front to duck the blow from behind. It all happened so quickly that the sergeant found himself striking his own comrade in the head with his sword, cutting into the half-devil's left horn. "Curse you!" the Diabolus shouted, holding his head. Bastian never stopped moving. He rolled into the forest clearing and then over to the brambles on Hawkrider's side. Then the two Fey folk slipped back into the shadows. The leader of the Crusaders was unusually large and muscular for a Tiéjan. He sported a thin mustache and a chin beard. He pulled the wounded Diabolus back from the glade's entrance with his sword drawn. Blood seeped at the gash at the base of the Crusader's horn. "Sorry, can you run?" The sergeant searched in the misty darkness for the enemies who seemed to appear and disappear at will. It made Bastian smile to see his fear. The elder and the fairy were close, but hidden by the glade's enchantments and their natural G. The Sakura woman and the young man of the Tiéran circled back to the battle site. Instead of re-engaging, she searched with her hands on the forest floor for the wand she had dropped. The young man took out a wand of his own, made of cypress wood with a blue tip, and proclaimed, "By the ladder of Yvain, I heal you!" A pale blue light emanated from the wand and blessed the half-devil's head. Bastian felt warm inside, like he had just woken up from a long nap. As for the Diabolus, he touched his horn to confirm that the wound had healed. "Just get me out of here!" Hawkrider released another volley of needles, and Bastian leapt out of the brambles, waving his two swords and shouting. The sudden display of force inspired the sergeant to fall back quickly, pulling the Diabolus with him by his armor, but the Sakura officer protected their retreat. With her lilac-tipped wand, she cursed, "By the hammer of justice, bind!" A thick wad of sticky rope shot out at Bastian and caught the hilt of his left sword. It stuck to his hand and to some of the branches behind him. The sergeant tried to use the opportunity to strike the trapped elder. "Dirty Fey creature!" But Bastian deflected his bow with his other sword arm, and Hawkrider poked the sergeant with his rapier from behind. Out flew Damselwing from the glade, with a squadron of Spitfires behind him. That was enough for the Diabolus. The half-double stumbled into the arms of his female comrade, and they ran off together into the forest. Realizing that his officers had all now disengaged, the sergeant retreated as well. But as the Sakura woman fell back, she shouted, "I'll see you again, filthy elder." A date with a dork? Looking forward to it. Bastian wanted to extend his two middle fingers, as the peasant boys do in the lands of Nod, but his hand was stuck to the thorn bush. Damselwing shouted, "Fire!" A shower of needles flew through the forest. Bastian flew out of the glade to Hawkrider's side. Together again, Hawkrider, Bastian, and the fairy force watched as the Crusaders escaped into the wood. Bastian decided then and there that he would start hating dorks. A fire grew in his belly, erupting into flame in his hands. It burned right through the binding. Bastian liked the idea that he had outsmarted a squad of Crusaders. He was particularly proud that he had done so without using his swords to kill. It felt like he was somehow staying true to his guild. Thinking up something clever to say, he swaggered past the linden trees, like he had won the first prize in a knife-throwing contest at the village fair. Entering the glade, You would have to be blind to not be struck by the sublime beauty of the great hawthorn. Twice as tall as the largest of the lindens, this ancient tree had grown in the middle of the glade for 10,000 years. It looked like an ordinary, if majestic tree from above, but only to confound the casual thrush flying by. From below, it was pure magic. Bastian later explained it to me this way. The roots of the great hawthorn grow firmly in these mortal fields, but the branches reach out into the spirit world. It acts like a kind of bridge, softening the barrier between here and there, making it permeable, as if the tree carves out a place for the pneumatoi within the Pætheon. The glade was dark as a theater. A faint green light filtered through its leaves like the crack of a door, but without a single source. By some kind of osmosis, attracted perhaps by our very mortality, tiny particles of mana from the spirit world slipped through, and, ignited by the passage, floated gently down onto the glade like a cascade of stardust. Bastian tried several times to replicate the dramatic effect, but he never quite got it right. The great hawthorn grew fresh green berries that turned dark red when ripe. It also grew blossoms of 5 petals with differently colored anthers atop delicate white stamens. The berries and flowers hid themselves on its branches under the leaf canopy, which acted like a lintel for the portal to the spirit world underneath. The hawthorn was sprouting and shedding these blossoms all the time, falling in a gentle rain of petals onto the grass, decorating the floor of moss and mushrooms like an elegant carpet sprinkled with manna. A fresh little creek ran through the glade. It was abuzz with pixie and bees and bats and dragonflies and ladybugs, all flying here and there. Bastian was struck anew by the dazzling variety of forms and colors, as diverse as the natural world itself. Legs like mushroom stems, hair like grass, shells on their backs, snowflakes for eyes. The reason, simply, is that young fairy grow out of plants and rocks and other natural things like a baby from a womb. Fairy folk love to adorn their bodies with all sorts of accessories to express their personality. Anything they find, from forest, farm, or even fortified town. Bastian was all about expressing himself too, as I'm sure you've realized. So he kept his swords drawn as props for the role of conquering hero. But the fairy were not collecting pollen from the stamens, or adding dew to the flowers, or dancing in the air. They were carrying bodies. It made no sense to Bastian, since he had sent the Crusaders packing. He saw some of his friends, and many others, laid out on the grass or on spongy fungi, like they were taking a nap, still as wilted wildflowers. Bastian decided that they were playing a trick on him. He turned around, expecting Bayberry or Damselwing to jump out at him in surprise.
Some fairy, he saw now, had broken wings or bruised limbs.
The bees were covering the wounded in royal jelly, the bats feeding the ones who were not gagged with fruit nectar. Bastian knew that jelly speeded healing, and the fermented nectar numbed pain. All part of the gag, he decided. Other fairy were covered by the dork's sticky rope. It was quite the curse. They looked as if they had flown headlong into a spider's web. Some were bound so tightly they could hardly breathe. The free sprites were doing their best to release them from their bonds, but rapiers were only sharp on the point, like the stingers of bees. When the bats tried to bite through the cords, their own mouths got so full of that sticky fiber that they could barely open them. The cries only got worse when released. "I'm sorry," some began flailing around. "I didn't mean to do it." They were wailing on the top of their lungs. The din made his skin crawl, like he was being punished along with them. But for what? Bastian could think of nothing he had done wrong. Here you can see the magic of mythos at work, the way that the stories we tell ourselves about who we are shape our actions and perceptions. Many fairy did not cry out at all, One was Coxcomb, an older pixie who knew all the classic tricks. His hair was usually burning, which he would use to light a fire under his targets, but his embers had turned to ash. Another was Spear Thistle, still wearing the red tail feathers of her squadron. Her entire body was covered in spikes, which made her fierce in battle. She loved nothing more than a good laugh. Bastian knelt down to try to tickle her awake. He waited for the punchline, but neither moved. Neither breathed. What makes a man blind to that which he does not want to see? In his memoir of the Sixth Age, Tull of Ernest, the Guelphy sage, asked this question of the Pætheon, the tyrant who seized power over the Ring Empire. I often wondered the same about Bastian in the Eighth. No, no, no! Bastian shook his head. I wanted to imagine that the young elder began to feel something akin to shame or regret. He could see that the wounded pixie calmed down only when Queen Melisande came to each of them and dispelled the evil dream. He could also see that there was only one of her, and she could only work so fast. Instead, he found Hawkrider. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, Hawk?" He coughed the words out angrily, pointing his finger. Hawkrider seemed not to be listening. "Bayberry, take the squad to the perimeter. Search for enemies. Damselwing, follow the Crusaders. Convince them that they need to keep running." The guard and the pilot nodded and shot off. Bastian was right up in Hawkrider's face this time. "Where were you?" "Where was I?" Hawkrider replied incredulously. Bastian challenged his commander. "How could you let this happen?" "You're right. I should have been here. Instead, I was looking for you, Bastian." Hawkrider flew off to care for the wounded. Bastian looked at one scene of suffering after the next. It felt like he was trying to keep too many knives in the air at the same time. Melisande glided over to another victim of the Dork attack for more triage. It was Dewdancer. She was tightly bound and gagged. Bastian stumbled for words. I didn't mean, it's not... His knives began to fall to the ground, dead. The Queen spoke as she abjured the spell. With a touch, the sticky ropes shredded into helpless fibers that squirmed onto the grass like mealworms. But Dewdancer did not respond. She could always be found playing on the surface of streams and ponds. Her lizard-like skin repelled all water, but it did not resist the smothering curse of the Crusaders. Bastian dropped his arms. His body did not know where to stand. His hands did not know what to hold. His foot began to shake. Their cries. They seemed louder now than the melee had ever been before. Melisande gently closed the fairy's eyes. We did send Captain Hawkrider to look for you. Bastian covered his head with his arms. He stared down at the vomiter mushrooms and felt sick. We hoped you would help us protect our family. The Queen's voice sounded to Bastian like the ringing of bells in a dream, tolling deeply. Dewdancer's dead. Coxcomb and Spear Thistle too. Bastian's head was spinning. I was late, he managed to get out. I didn't mean... You didn't kill my children, Bastian. The Crusaders are the ones responsible. I could have stopped them! But you didn't. We needed you, and you were not here. The Queen spoke as gently as a fluttering wing. It was a statement of fact, not judgment. It cut into his heart. Bastian felt overwhelmed by guilt for doing the things he loved to do, as if she was asking him to be someone other than himself. But it was his father's voice he heard. Someday your joking will get someone hurt. The young elder tried to do what he always did, twist it around, act the fool, score the pun, but he couldn't execute. Not in front of Dewdancer and Coxcomb, not in front of Spear Thistle. It was like he tripped in the middle of his act. We have a saying among the Andras, on récolte ce qu'on a semé. We reap what we sow. Bastian could have surveyed the nearby forest for signs of an ogre in one day. Both he and Hawkrider could have been in the fairy glade or close by at the start of the assault, not just at the end. That alone would have reduced the number and severity of casualties. Had they been smart about it, Hawkrider and Bastian might have even been able to prevent our crusaders from entering the glade in the first place.
As a detective, I saw something tragic in Bastian's mythos, a flaw in his character. Now I see it with more nuance. We all need stories to live. We all live by our own stories. Bastian was flame dancing himself into the wrong mythos.
Hawkrider flew back, carrying one of the dead fairy. It was a particularly small fledgling. He placed the child's corpse down gently next to Spear Thistle and flew over to Bastian. He elbowed the young elder in the shoulder. "Pick up your swords. Get back on your elephant." Hawkrider added a quick "Your Majesty" and a mid-flight bow. Remembering his prep school manners, Bastian bowed awkwardly. The captain addressed the queen. "If you could tell me what happened." Almost 3 feet tall, Melisande looked like an elder child, but more petite, more ephemeral. She had the double wings of a dragonfly, and her bright green hair was filled with flowers. Her brown skin had the color and texture of thick tree bark, though almost translucent. Like the great hawthorn to which she was bound, her roots grew in our world, her branches beyond it. "The Crusaders came from the outpost," the queen explained. "How did they penetrate your enchantments?" "They were chasing a fugitive of some kind," she continued. "It seems they stumbled on us by mistake." "The Crusaders used some kind of pact magic," Hawkrider observed. "Yes," Melisande replied. "One created these bindings, and the other punished." Hawkrider meant the anguished cries of the fairy. "Punishment for what?" Bastian's hand began to twitch. "You're standing before the queen." "For playing? For making folks laugh?" Bastian gestured at the blood-stained grass. Hawkrider tried to deflect. "Gratuitous play is against the laws of their empire." The queen's voice was somber. "They believe their laws apply to us." Outrage welled up in Bastian. "But we're always playing tricks. It's our nature. How can something be illegal if it's in our nature?" Bastian used "we," even though he was not, in fact, a fairy. The queen sighed. "The fates are callous gods." "And the inquest," Hawkrider added, "is merciless." Melisande glided forward and brushed Bastian's forehead. He felt his whole body relax. He lost the will to fight, at least not with Hawkrider and the queen. "Continue, Captain." "Please, Majesty," Bastian interrupted. "Give me something to do. I want to help." "We all do. That's why we need to work together to find the best way forward. Be patient." Bastian tried, but his foot kept shaking. Hawkrider began again only once he was sure that Bastian would stay quiet. "Do you know how this pact magic works, Your Majesty? It could help me develop a new strategy." "The Crusaders use these sticks to invoke a blessing or curse from one of the gods. In this case," she held a red wand, "the Red Queen punishes. She makes the target feel all the pain and suffering that they've ever caused other mortal beings." "How do we rid our people of this curse?" "With love and acceptance." "Yes!" Bastian agreed, anxious to be rid of the guilt himself. "Let's do that!" "It takes time, and I have so many children in pain." The queen looked at her people with such affection. It made Bastian feel more at home here, in this glen, than anywhere else in the Pætheon. "You've gotten into trouble a lot with the law," Hawkrider said to the young elder. "What's it to you?" "Yes or no, Bastian?" I don't know. They punished you. Where are you going with this? Most of the time you deserved it, right? Pretty much. But did you ever not deserve it? That was a bit of a head-scratcher for Bastian, since he always kind of assumed that he was guilty no matter what really happened. I guess, maybe. So what made you feel better about yourself? Forgetting about it. Bastian began to glow green. That's it, he snapped his fingers. They need to forget about it. I'm going to give them a show. A show? Hawkrider looked surprised. I, too, was a little shocked. It seemed wholly improper to me, when I first heard this tale, for Bastian to perform a circus act when so many of his friends had just been killed or wounded. As a prospective storyteller myself, it felt like this Bastian character was running away from reality instead of facing it. But listening to Bastian tell the tale in a wizard's library, I realized that it was I who had misunderstood the magic of mythos. Our self-deceptions are neither good nor bad in themselves. It all depends on what we do with them. You gonna help? Hawkrider dismissed the thought. I'm no entertainer. You are now. Go get me some berries and some more pilots. It doesn't seem right. There's nothing like a tall tale, the Queen said, to restore their hope for a better world. The captain took that as an order. He flew off with a sour berry face. The former circus headliner moved away from the parts of the glade that had become a makeshift hospital. He found a corner where there were no pixie on the ground, and the trees had cast a heavy shadow. Hawkrider and the other pilots picked a bunch of hawthorn berries in shades of green and red. Bastian started to juggle them. He added a pinch of mana. Soon he was keeping hundreds of them in the air at one time. Bastian drew the 2 scimitars that were sheathed on his back and started dancing. With the swords, with the berries. As they orbited each other, sparks began to fly, lighting some of the berries on fire in all the colors of the rainbow, reflecting off the flowers on the tree. Bastian did not understand the inner nature of mana. He was too lazy to do that much studying. He had learned to juggle stardust like any of the things he sent flying through the air. Bastian was a jongleur. He knew how to open the doors of fantasy and invite his audience to enter with him. This was the power of mythos. It invites each of us to imagine our own place in the story. Bastian knew from experience, if I can change their way of seeing, I can change their way of being. So Bastian struck his 2 swords against each other. The sparks arose from the blades, but he stoked the flame with G from his belly. The swords erupted in fire. Pixie and brownie and fairy of all kinds, he had to project over the wailing and moaning. I give you the latest addition to my repertoire of epic tales, Bastian Flamedancer and the Great Hawthorne. Bastian bowed to the majestic tree, and in the play of light and shadow, it almost seemed like the Great Hawthorne bowed back. Bastian danced. As he carved the air with his blades, the flames flickered behind them like curtains of fire. The berries began to take shapes: mountains, rivers, moons, suns, stars. Hawkrider and his pilots flew through and over and around them. I thought you're not an entertainer. I'm flying, not performing. Slowly the sprites began to take notice. They still groaned and squirmed, but they were no longer wildly flailing or crying. Fireflies joined the show, for they were awful divas. Showing off, they created both darkness and light to exaggerate the effects of the colors. The hawthorn seemed to extend its limbs to embrace them in a theater in the round. Bastian was performing again in the main ring, and he was happy. Gotta give it more. The show. Make it all that matters. The sprites were quiet, mesmerized by the play of lights in the glade, on the undersides of the leaves, against the starry sky, but the pain was still evident in their faces. Bastian remembered how the ringmaster of his troop, Rem of Brand, used to encourage him to tap the hidden veins of creativity in his spirit. Paint them a picture they can't ignore. Help them imagine a different world, a better world, a world of fantasy and wonder. Rem was the only adult who ever saw something more in Bastian than just a troublemaker, other than Hawkrider. On the next run, Hawkrider and his flying battalion played a little trick on Bastian. They spilled their bundle of berries on the elder's head, which caused a rainbow of color to explode all around him. A little pixie named Melody, who had beetles' pinchers around her mouth, spoke up for the Hawthorne. "That'll teach you to pick my berries." A chuckle ran through the crowd. Fairy began to sit up on the moss or climb on mushrooms to see better. Sparkles danced from the leaves and petals of the glade like they were dancing on the inside of the night sky. Now the Spitfires joined the fun, and everyone clapped just for them. Hawkrider and his crew used the distraction to fly behind Bastian and poke him in the rear with their tiny rapiers. Bastian yelped like a fox pup. The audience erupted in laughter. Hawkrider and his team flew around waving their hands at the crowd like heroes. Even the Queen smiled through her sadness. "Not so fast." Bastian grabbed some more berries, juggled them with mana, and struck each piece of fruit with his blades in quick succession. He made the projectiles track their targets all around the glade, while Hawkrider's pilots flew only half-heartedly, sometimes upside down, looking back at the projectiles as if taunting the missiles to catch up.
The twilight sky inside the glen was streaked by an aerial dogfight between glowing fairy and star-guided meteors.
Bastian was center stage again.
He had masked his guilt and his shame.
He felt so good about himself that he offered some free verse. "Give it light, make it bright, add a fight and a flight. Need a cure for a fearful night? A show will put the Pætheon aright." It worked like magic. The audience looked up, forgetting the past, waiting on the edge of their toadstools for the final trick. When the berries exploded into flowers, landing on the heads of the pixie, making them look ridiculous, Fairy erupted in laughter and applause. The curse of punishment was broken. The feelings of guilt were gone. The pain became nothing more than memory. Only the sorrow remained. Bastian let the magic of flame dancing dissipate slowly. Smoke and petals and stardust fell to the forest floor, covering everything and everyone with a layer of joy. The Hawthorne bent back up. Hawkrider landed on his shoulder, and Bastian flicked the flowers off of his friend's head. "Now that's how you do it." Hawkrider smiled back through his heavy breathing. He had been flying rather fast to avoid the flaming berries. That was the easy part. The lightning bugs brought light back to the glade, and Bastian saw the cold bodies of his dead friends, now with a stark clarity. There were maybe 50 in total. They were arranged at the base of the tree like so many fallen flowers. Hawkrider tried to reassure the young elder. "There's nothing more we can do here." The Queen rose up to the middle of the glade to make a pronouncement. Everyone who could stood or flew at attention. Even the wounded were helped up so they could lean on toadstools. "My children, our home is no longer safe. The Crusaders know how to find us. They have returned to their outpost for now, but they will come back soon enough. They will bring their swords and their axes, their bonds and their punishments." "But why?" a fairy cried out. "What do they want from us? Why do they want to hurt our family?" "They think we don't belong here in the Pætheon," the Queen explained. Fairy never excluded anyone from a game, not even Ogre. Damn restoration of order, Bastian whispered in Hawkrider's ear. Hush, Hawkrider chided. He'd deport anyone like us. Hush! Hawkrider knew better than to ask who he was. With Bastian, it was always his father, or as Bastian called him, the abductor. The Crusaders are probably cutting down Hawthorns in all the 5 lands. We're silent when the Queen speaks. He won't stop until every last bridge to the spirit world is sealed shut. Enough, Bastian! The Queen kept answering their questions, but without telling them the whole story. She did not want them to lose hope. This was a mythos of a different kind, a fiction that helps someone do the impossible. Bastian kept talking through it all. So what's the plan? Retreat? Resettle? Resist? Hawkrider sighed. They had debated the options before. Even if we flee back to the eastern bow, those dorks will find the glade. Those Crusaders will cut down the great Hawthorne. Hawkrider left the rest unstated, but Bastian knew. There's no fairy queen without a great Hawthorne. We must find a new home. I know of a sanctuary. She spoke now with authority. And I know we can find it. You must trust your queen. Bastian stormed away. Hawkrider flew after him. That was rude. It's a crime. What, your manners? I won't let him get away with it. The Queen's got it all under control. I'm done playing games. Don't do anything rash. We should have shot first. Meaning? I'm gonna burn down that damn outpost. You may think this was just bravado. A whole army of Fairy didn't stand a chance against a garrison of Crusaders in their own outpost, and Hawkrider had already lost many good pilots. But Bastian ran off into the wood anyway, following the trail of the retreating Crusaders. Reluctantly, Hawkrider whistled a summons to the nearest pilot. Find Bayberry and Damselwing. Leave the Royal Guard to protect the glade. Tell them to gather what's left of the Red Wings and Spitfires, and meet me at the Crusader outpost. And Hawkrider flew off into the wood to catch up with the young elder. As soon as he started to run, Bastian felt better. He found something to do with his burning feelings of guilt. Other than feeling them, he found a new target for his resentment. Bastian, Flamedancer, and the Crusader outpost. It'll make a great story.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Look for the next episode, Sanchx and the Quiet Pond, and the novel, Detention, Book 1 of the Tales of the Fastbrækers. You can visit thepætheon.com for free maps, glossaries, and more, or support this project at ko-fi.com/thepætheon for access to Discord, hard copies, role-playing adventures, and more. Music created by Gerbob for the Pætheon LLC. The Pætheon and the Fastbrækers are registered trademarks of the Pætheon LLC. No part of this story or audio recording may be reproduced or transmitted on any medium for any reason without the permission of the Pætheon LLC. Bastian and the Great Hawthorne, What Came Out, April 2025, copyright 2025, the Pætheon LLC, all rights reserved.